Ford has long ruled the pickup world, but not every truck it built made it into the history books. Behind the F-Series legends are a dozen rare, powerful, or downright strange pickups that Ford quietly released, then just as quietly erased. Some were ahead of their time. Some were built for speed. Others were one-year wonders, experimental beasts, or regional oddities that barely made it off the line. They didn't fail, they vanished. The 1991 Ford F-150 Knight edition was one of those fleeting, blink-and-you-miss-it factory packages that now feels like a snapshot of its time, a bold, blacked-out truck that hinted at the cultural shift in how Americans viewed pickups. Once strictly utilitarian, pickups were becoming personal statements, lifestyle vehicles for the weekend warrior and the suburban cruiser. The Knight edition, with its stealthy appearance and limited availability, was Ford's early attempt to tap into that growing trend. Though it wasn't revolutionary under the skin, its style and swagger made it a standout, if only for a brief moment in the early 90s. Launched quietly for the 1991 model year, the F-150 Knight edition was aimed at a very specific niche, younger buyers who wanted a truck that felt cool, urban, and maybe even a little rebellious. This was long before blacked-out trim became a standard factory option, back when most F-150s still wore chrome like a badge of honor. The Knight, by contrast, was completely dechromed. It featured blacked-out grills, body-colored bumpers, shadowy headlamp bezels, black mirror caps, and a subtle yet unmistakable Knight stripe and graphic package running down the sides, a signature look that made it pop without screaming for attention. It came only in raven black, giving it a sinister, uniform appearance that was rare among the bright, two-tone trucks of the time. Under the hood, most Knight editions were equipped with Ford's venerable 5.0-liter V8, delivering modest but solid performance by early 90s standards. Some also had the optional 5.8-liter Windsor V8 for a bit more grunt, though exact drivetrain options varied depending on configuration. The Knight package was available on XLT Lariat trims, so these weren't stripped-down workhorses. They came with power windows, upgraded interior trim, and often bucket seats or premium cloth benches. It wasn't a performance truck like the later SVT Lightning, but it didn't need to be. Its cool factor came from its aesthetics, exclusivity, and attitude. What made the Knight particularly notable is that it represented one of Ford's earliest attempts at marketing a pickup, not just as a tool, but as a personal lifestyle vehicle, a step toward the modern idea of a sport luxury truck. In that sense, the Knight edition was ahead of its time. The average buyer in 1991 still viewed full-size pickups as blue-collar machines, not something you'd customize or polish on weekends. But the Knight had an audience, and it sold well enough in its brief run to earn a second year in 1992. And then, just as quickly, it disappeared. Ford never made a big marketing push for the Knight. There were a few ads in magazines and some low-key dealer promotions, but it was never meant to be a mainstream product. That exclusivity, combined with the package's short lifespan, has made surviving examples quite rare. Most were driven hard, traded in, or modified beyond recognition. Today, finding a clean, unmolested F-150 Knight edition is a genuine challenge. And yet, among those who remember, it carries a unique appeal. It was a truck with a personality. It looked a cool stock, and cooler still with mild modifications. It was the kind of vehicle that suggested its owner might have also driven a 5.0 Mustang, but needed something to haul speakers, dirt bikes, or a jet ski on the weekend. In retrospect, the Knight edition occupies a strange but fascinating spot in Ford's truck history. It wasn't a powerhouse, nor a luxurious flagship. It didn't break performance records or redefine capability, but it forecast a future where style mattered in trucks, where buyers wanted something that reflected their identity, not just their job. In that way, it was a direct precursor to everything from the Harley-Davidson F-150s to the Tremor and FX4 packages. It helped pave the way for the idea that a pickup could be a personal statement, dark, distinctive, and cool straight from the factory. Today, the 1991-92 F-150 Knight edition is finally beginning to earn recognition among collectors and enthusiasts, particularly those nostalgic for the pre-tech, analog feel of early 90s trucks. With its square body, simple drivetrain, and distinctive looks, it represents a different era, one where factory cool was just beginning to find its footing. It's an artifact of a transition, a stylish footnote that helped reshape how America viewed its most beloved vehicle segment. And for those lucky enough to own or restore one today, it's a rare reminder that even work trucks can have swagger. The 1978 Ford F-150 Lariat Super Cab with the 460 V8 was a paradox on wheels, a working-class brute that flirted with luxury at a time when such a thing made little sense to most buyers. It was born into an era of contradictions. Horsepower was dying, fuel prices were skyrocketing, and yet Ford quietly rolled out this heavy-duty, long-wheelbase, big-block monster wrapped in the trappings of upper-trim elegance. It wasn't built for racers or suburban dads. It was for the guy who needed to tow a trailer, haul lumber, and still enjoy a comfortable bench seat with a hint of refinement, even if it meant filling the tank twice a week. The Super Cab configuration was still relatively new at the time, introduced by Ford in the mid-70s to bridge the gap between a regular cab and a full crew cab. It provided just enough room behind the front seats for toolboxes, kids, or unlucky coworkers on lunch breaks. But when paired with the Lariat trim, a badge that would go on to become synonymous with Ford truck luxury, the 1978 Super Cab offered more than just space. It had padded door panels, extra chrome, plusher seat upholstery, carpeted floors, faux wood grain dash appliques, and more insulation. In a sea of bare-bones, steel-wheeled trucks, this thing bordered on opulent, especially for rural America in the late 70s. And then there was the engine. Ford's monstrous 460 cubic inch V8 was originally designed for the Lincoln Continental, not a half-ton pickup. It was big, smooth, and overbuilt. An engine meant for towing, merging onto freeways with authority, or simply rumbling down the highway with a low, effortless growl. In 1978, the 460 in the F-150 was rated around 220 horsepower and 360 lb-ft of torque, which might not sound like much today, but in the smog-choked twilight of the muscle car era, it was still a giant among shrinking engines. It had the torque to haul fifth wheels or horse trailers without breaking a sweat, and when properly optioned, this F-150 could pull loads that would have made earlier trucks cry for mercy. Yet the 460 V8 wasn't for everyone. This truck guzzled gas like it was a competitive sport. Some owners reported single-digit MPG numbers when towing or even just cruising through town. In the wake of the 1973 oil crisis and looming 1979 fuel shortages, most buyers shied away from big displacement options. The base inline 6 or 302 small block were far more common. As a result, the 460-powered Lariat Super Cab became a rarity almost instantly, and what few were built were often driven into the ground, used as ranch trucks, contractors' rigs, or long-haul beasts that never saw a collector's garage. The irony is that, despite its thirst, the 78 F-150 Lariat 460 was a true predecessor to today's luxury pickups. Long before King Ranch and Platinum trims, long before anyone dreamed of cooled seats and panoramic roofs in a half-ton, this truck was laying the foundation. It was proof that buyers, at least a few, wanted something more than just utility. They wanted comfort, style, and presence. And the Lariat Super Cab delivered that with thick chrome bumpers, two-tone paint options, and a road presence that said, yes, I work, but I also ride in style. Today, the 1978 Lariat 460 Super Cab is a ghost. Few survived. Most rusted away in fields or were junked when repairs became too costly. Others were sacrificed to engine swaps, their 460s yanked out for hot rod projects, or abandoned due to emissions complexity. Clean survivors are almost non-existent, and yet for those in the know, it's a hidden gem. A relic of a time when Ford was experimenting with the idea of a truck being more than just a tool. A powerful chrome-laden bridge between the bare-knuckle workhorses of the 60s and the feature-rich pickups of the 21st century. It's a footnote in F-Series history, but an important one, because the 1978 F-150 Lariat Super Cab 460 V8 dared to ask a question decades before the market caught up. What if a truck could be both brawny and beautiful? Its answer was bold, brash, and brutally thirsty, and today almost nobody remembers it. But for a brief moment, before luxury trucks became fashionable, this long-bed giant wore the crown. The 2001 Ford SVT F150 Lightning Bolt concept is one of the most forgotten, bizarre, and ahead-of-its-time ideas ever to emerge from Ford's performance think tank, SVT, Special Vehicle Team. Most people remember the supercharged 5.4-liter Lightning trucks that lit up drag strips in the early 2000s. But few recall that deep in the shadows of Dearborn, a radically different version of the Lightning was quietly prototyped, a fully electric performance pickup, in 2001. That's right, long before Tesla made EVs cool, and long before the Ford Lightning name was reimagined for a mass-market electric pickup in 2022. SVT was tinkering with electrons and torque curves. The project, unofficially dubbed the Lightning Bolt, was never intended for production. It was more of a technological dare, a proof of concept for what might be possible if Ford's muscle truck DNA collided with battery-powered propulsion. And though it faded almost instantly from view, what little we know about it paints a fascinating picture. At a glance, it looked like a standard 10th-gen F150 SVT Lightning. Muscular bodywork, aggressive stance, 18-inch wheels, and the same signature step-side bed. But under the hood, or more accurately, under the cab and bed, lived something entirely different. Instead of the supercharged Triton V8 that made the production Lightning famous, the Bolt was powered by an electric drivetrain and experimental battery packs. Details were scarce even back then, and Ford never released exact specs. But insiders and engineers who later spoke off the record said it made somewhere in the ballpark of 350 horsepower, with instant torque delivery that rivaled the gas Lightning and low-end pole. Charging systems were primitive, battery tech was bulky, and thermal management was rudimentary at best. The concept used nickel-metal hydride batteries, the same type you'd find in early hybrids like the Toyota Prius, and they were heavy, so heavy in fact that performance was a mixed bag. The 0-60 mph time was estimated to be in the mid 6-second range, which was impressive for the era, but not earth-shattering. Top speed was limited and range was, frankly, dismal by modern standards, maybe 80 to 100 miles on a good day. Still, it wasn't meant for production, and Ford knew it. The Lightning Bolt was more of an internal science experiment, a vehicle to test drivability, cooling systems, weight distribution, and the feasibility of electric torque in a full-size pickup long before such things were marketable. And let's be clear, in 2001, the average truck buyer didn't want an electric anything. Fuel was cheap, torque meant cubic inches, and the idea of plugging in your truck was laughable. The public wasn't ready, the technology wasn't ready, and even SVT, for all its wild ideas, knew they were at least 2 decades ahead of their time. So the Lightning Bolt concept was quietly shelved, never officially shown to the public, and never brought to auto shows. It became little more than a ghost story among SVT engineers, a whisper of what could have been. No glossy press kits, no public test drives, no grand unveilings. It was a moment of genuine electric foresight lost in the V8 thunder of its era. Even many hardcore SVT Lightning fans today have no idea this experimental bolt of brilliance ever existed. But looking back, the 2001 SVT Lightning Bolt may be more important now than it was then. It shows that Ford's performance engineers were already thinking ahead, already wondering what electric torque could do in a muscle truck package. In many ways, it was a spiritual ancestor to the 2022 F150 Lightning. Only raw, unrefined, and hidden away before the world was ready to embrace it. Today, there's almost no trace of the Lightning Bolt concept. No official photos have surfaced. No preserved example sits in a museum. It may have been dismantled, recycled, or locked away in one of Ford's countless engineering warehouses. But if it still exists, it belongs in the history books as one of the most forward-thinking and forgotten footnotes in the story of electric performance. It was a bolt of lightning before the storm. And then, just like that, it was gone. The 1984 Ford Ranger GT is one of those rare blink-and-you-missed-it curiosities that now live in the dusty corners of automotive history, a brief, half-remembered attempt to give America's budding compact truck buyers a taste of sportiness at a time when even the idea of a performance pickup was borderline absurd. It was Ford's effort to dress up the brand new Ranger with a bold visual personality and youthful flair, even if there wasn't enough muscle under the hood to back it up. Today, it stands as a peculiar relic from a transitional era, part marketing experiment, part design overreach, and part genuinely earnest effort to make the small truck segment exciting. The first-generation Ranger had only just launched in 1983, replacing the Ford Courier, a rebadged Mazda. For the first time, Ford was producing its own compact truck in-house, and the Ranger quickly proved it was a solid, well-built, and genuinely competitive player. But in a market full of utilitarian workhorses, Ford wanted to reach a different type of customer. Younger drivers who wanted style, sport, and personality without having to move up to a Mustang. So they created the GT trim, essentially trying to give the tiny Ranger a sporty street truck image that echoed what muscle cars had once done for coupes. Visually, the 1984 Ranger GT made an immediate impression. It wore model-specific blackout trim, body color bumpers, blacked-out grille, GT-specific graphics along the sides, and unique alloy wheels. It had fog lamps integrated into the front valance and a raked, aggressive stance that made it look ready to pounce. The interior received bucket seats with sporty cloth upholstery, a full-length center console, a floor-mounted shifter, and often a tachometer. Uncommon in trucks at the time, Ford wasn't just dressing it up on the outside. They were trying to infuse it with a driver-focused personality inside too. But the most notable element of the Ranger GT wasn't what it had. It was what it didn't have. The powertrain was completely unchanged from lesser models. It came equipped with a 2.8-liter clone V6 engine, borrowed from the Ford Capri and Mustang II, making around 115 horsepower and about 150 pound-feet of torque. Mated to a 4-speed manual, with a 5-speed becoming available shortly after, the GT was competent for its era, but it couldn't hope to deliver performance that matched its aggressive looks. There was no turbo option, no high-output variant, no sport exhaust, no additional grunt. The GT nameplate promised a hot truck, and what buyers got was really a warm one at best. And yet, in some ways, that almost made it more charming. Ford did make some meaningful changes. The GT had upgraded suspension components, including heavier-duty shocks, larger sway bars, and a lower ride height, making it legitimately more agile than the base Ranger. It handled corners better, looked sharper doing it, and had a genuine sense of purpose, even if it couldn't leave rubber on the pavement. Unfortunately, the GT's biggest problem was timing. In the mid-1980s, performance was a dirty word in most boardrooms. Emissions regulations and insurance premiums had killed off the muscle car era, and the Mustang GT had only just clawed its way back into relevance. Trucks were still seen largely as tools, not toys. There simply wasn't a strong market for a small, sporty pickup that looked like it wanted to be fast but wasn't. Ford gave it a try, but after just 2 years, 1984 and 1980, the Ranger GT was quietly pulled from the lineup. Most buyers either didn't know it existed or didn't want to pay extra for a trim package that didn't offer extra power. To add to its obscurity, the GT wasn't widely advertised, unlike the Mustang or Thunderbird Turbo Coupe, which had entire campaigns built around their performance image. The Ranger GT was something you discovered by accident, maybe sitting in the corner of a dealership lot, decked out in silver with red stripes, waiting for a buyer who wanted something different. It wasn't a hero model. It wasn't even a headline truck. It was a niche, a side note, a mild rebellion in a segment still finding its identity. Today, the Ranger GT has all but vanished. Most of them were daily driven into the ground, used up like any other compact truck. The few that remain are often in rough shape or missing their original graphics and interior trim. Unrestored examples in good condition are extremely rare, not because they were collectible, but because nobody thought to save them. They were never considered special, not even by the people who bought them. And that's exactly why they're interesting now. In a world where special editions are announced with confetti and social media campaigns, the 1984 Ranger GT is a reminder of when car makers took quiet risks, when they threw together a strange combination of marketing optimism, mild engineering changes. The 1990 Ford F350 Centurion 4x4 Crew Cab duly stands as one of the most gloriously excessive and bizarre trucks to ever roam American roads. Not from Ford's own factories, mind you, but from the hands of a specialty builder that blurred the line between cowboy luxury and custom apocalypse survival rig. Before the Super Duty name became synonymous with industrial-grade towing and commercial fleet reliability, Ford's full-size pickups had to rely on the aftermarket to create what people today would call a mega truck. And nobody filled that niche quite like Centurion vehicles, a company best known for giving Ford buyers the trucks Ford wouldn't build. Yet, at the time, Ford's official production lineup in the late 1980s and early 1990s didn't offer the full-blown four-door crew cab 4x4 dualies that ranchers, RV haulers, or status-conscious truck enthusiasts wanted. Ford did offer crew cabs, and it offered dual rear wheels, but not in combination with four-wheel drive on a retail scale, and certainly not with the kind of cabin luxury modern buyers expect. So Centurion stepped in and built what Ford wouldn't, taking brand-new F350 chassis cabs, lengthening the frames, grafting custom four-door crew cabs onto them, adding dual rear wheels and heavy-duty 4x4 running gear, and then stuffing the cabins with luxuries more suited to a Cadillac Brougham than a work truck. The result? A rolling fortress of American excess. The Centurion F350 Crew Cab, dually 4x4, unofficially dubbed by many enthusiasts today as a pre-Super Duty super truck. Mechanically, Centurion typically began with Ford's F350 chassis, usually a 7.5-liter, 460 big block V8 gas engine or the optional 7.3-liter IDI diesel, mated to a C6 automatic or 5-speed manual. These were already serious trucks built for hauling fifth wheels or towing massive trailers, but Centurion added to the recipe with a full 4x4 conversion, complete with solid front axles, transfer case linkage, and custom drive shafts. The dual rear wheels made them ideal for heavy towing, but they also gave the trucks a brawny, imposing stance. And yes, unlike today's factory Ford dualies, which offer 4x4 from the factory. At the time, getting this combination often required going through Centurion or similar conversion specialists. But the real drama was inside. Centurion didn't just throw 4 doors on and call it a day. No, these trucks were given the full 1980s luxury treatment, thick pile carpeting, deeply cushioned captain's chairs front and rear, sometimes 4 individual buckets, wood grain trim everywhere, from dash to door panels, velour or leather upholstery, ceiling-mounted mood lighting, and in many cases center consoles with integrated TVs and VCR players. Some builds even featured third-row seating, turning the truck into a pseudo-SUV limousine that could tow a house and entertain your kids on the way. The interiors were a strange but delightful fusion of pickup truck durability and custom van decadence. These trucks were marketed to a very specific kind of buyer: ranchers with long drives, business owners wanting to impress, horse trailer haulers, RV enthusiasts, and anyone who wanted the most extreme, over-the-top American pickup money could buy. They were rare, expensive, and impressive, and they turned heads wherever they went. Many had custom paint jobs, fiberglass fender flares, step bars, aluminum running boards, even full pinstriping and custom nameplates. No two were exactly alike, since Centurion was willing to tailor builds to each customer's requests. What makes the Centurion F350 4x4 dually so important today is that it directly influenced what Ford would eventually build itself. As customer demand for crew cab 4x4 dualies grew, and as the idea of a luxury truck began to take hold in the 1990s, Ford realized it was leaving money on the table. In 1999, Ford launched the Super Duty lineup, factory-built trucks with enormous frames, 4 full doors, 4x4, dualies, and interiors that finally started to offer real comfort. The Super Duty took everything the Centurion trucks pioneered, size, power, utility, and luxury, and made it mainstream. Once Ford did it in-house, There was no more need for Centurion to do it custom. As a result, these Centurion converted F350s faded into obscurity. Most were used exactly as intended. Hard. They towed, they hauled, they sat outside in the sun for decades. Many were overworked, under-maintained, or simply too large and thirsty to survive the gas crunches of the early 2000s. A few ended up in RV parks, pulling 40-foot Airstreams. Others ended up as forgotten yard trucks or dismantled for parts. Finding a clean one today is a near impossible challenge. And when you do, it's usually owned by someone who knows exactly what they have and won't let it go. In the end, the 1990 Ford F350 Centurion 4x4 crew cab dually wasn't just a custom truck, it was a glimpse into the future. The 1965 Ford F100 Custom Cab Camper Special wasn't just another pickup. It was a time capsule on wheels, built for a very specific American dream that burned brightly in the mid-1960s and then faded almost as quickly as it arrived. Designed during the height of the post-war leisure boom, this truck represented a moment when slide-in campers were the newest symbol of freedom, mobility, and middle-class adventure. Ford saw an opportunity to tailor a version of their trusted half-ton to accommodate this growing lifestyle. And so the Camper Special was born. But despite its practical upgrades and a clever name, it ended up as one of the most overlooked footnotes in Ford truck history. The Camper Special package wasn't just a sticker or a badge. It was a legitimate engineering response to a new kind of customer. People who wanted to bring their homes with them on the road before RVs had fully taken over the space. Ford equipped the F100 Camper Special with reinforced rear springs and beefier shocks to better handle the added weight of a slide-in camper unit. These weren't just cosmetic touches, they were necessary upgrades because a loaded camper could push a regular F100's payload to the edge of its limits, especially on long road trips or up steep grades. The truck also featured a wider heavy-duty rear axle, upgraded cooling systems for the engine and transmission, and, crucially, extended towing mirrors that gave drivers the ability to see around the bulk of the camper body. Factory wiring for camper electrical hookups was also included, a fairly advanced feature at the time. Some even came with larger fuel tanks and dual batteries to help run camper accessories like interior lights, water pumps, and early refrigerators. In essence, this was a truck purpose-built for long hauls across the American West, hauling a steel and aluminum mini-home, often filled with a family, a disron, and the lingering aroma of campfire bacon. The custom cab trim level added even more character to the package. It included bright work, upgraded upholstery, dual sun visors, full carpeting, chrome bumpers, and sometimes even two-tone paint. These weren't stripped-down work trucks. They were designed for comfort and pride of ownership, a middle ground between utility and show. Yet despite all these upgrades and intentions, the Camper Special F100s didn't exactly fly off dealer lots. Why? Because by the late 60s, people were moving toward bigger trucks, 3/4 and 1-ton pickups and plows, to handle the increasing size and weight of modern campers. As camper shells became taller, heavier, and more luxurious, the humble half-ton F100, even with suspension upgrades, struggled to keep up. Buyers started gravitating to the F250 Camper Specials instead, which could handle the loads with less compromise. In fact, most people today associate the Camper Special name with those bigger trucks from the late 60s through the early 70s, not the original F100 versions. Making matters worse for the 1965 F100 Camper Specials collectability today is the fact that very few were preserved in original condition. Most were used exactly as intended. They went on family road trips, hauled campers for thousands of miles, were parked in campsites from Yellowstone to Yosemite, and eventually worked their way into retirement hauling hay, scrap metal, or firewood. Over time, the camper shells rotted, the wiring frayed, the mirrors were tossed aside, and the truck itself faded into the general pool of beat-up farm vehicles and half-remembered Craigslist listings. Today, spotting a real factory-built 1965 Ford F100 Camper Special, especially in custom cab trim, and especially with original camper wiring and towing mirrors intact, is like seeing a shooting star over a national park. They're vanishingly rare, partly because so few were made, and partly because almost none were kept as collector vehicles. Few owners ever thought of them as special. They were bought to be used, not preserved. And so they disappeared. One road trip, one gravel driveway, one forgotten barn at a time. But now, with the rise of vintage overlanding culture and the growing appreciation for mid-century Americana, the 1965 Camper Special is slowly being rediscovered. It's a reminder of a different kind of muscle, not horsepower but hauling power. Not quarter-mile times but cross-country reliability. It's a blue-collar time machine from a moment when the American family vacation didn't involve airports or reservations. Just a map, a tank of gallonenta, and a camper strapped to the bed. The 1965 Ford F150 Camper Special wasn't just a truck. It was a philosophy. And though few remember it now, those who do know it was something truly special. Built for a narrow moment, perfectly timed, and almost completely lost to history. The 1995 Ford F150 Eddie Bauer Edition, in short bed 4x4 form, is one of those quietly forgotten gems that once blurred the line between rugged utility and upscale comfort, before that was even a trend. Today, pickup trucks with heated leather seats, infotainment screens, and six-figure price tags are everywhere. But back in the mid-1990s, the idea of a luxurious full-size pickup was borderline heresy. Trucks were meant for work. They were supposed to get dirty, haul hay, pull trailers, and maybe carry a gun rack, not wear color-keyed trim, soft cloth interiors, and designer badging. That's what made the Eddie Bauer short bed 4x4 so special and so misunderstood. Ford's Eddie Bauer trim line had already made a name for itself on SUVs like the Bronco and Explorer, adding a dash of outdoorsy sophistication and prestige. It was born out of a partnership with the upscale outfitter, meant to suggest a rugged but refined lifestyle, the kind of vehicle that looked at home both on a mountain trail and in a country club parking lot. When Ford applied that same idea to the F-150, it created something subtly revolutionary. A pickup that didn't just work, but also looked good doing it. The 1990 Eddie Bauer F-150 came loaded with features that were, at the time, remarkably plush for a pickup. Dual captain's chairs with full cloth upholstery, a center console with cup holders, air conditioning, power everything, special exterior badging, and most notably a tasteful two-tone paint job, usually with tan rocker panels and trim that hinted at SUV lineage. In short bed, four-wheel drive form, it looks sporty, tight, and refined, especially with optional aluminum wheels and fog lamps. It wasn't just a tool, it was a statement. But here's the problem. In 1999, the average truck buyer didn't want a statement. The short bed was seen as less practical than a long bed, and most working folks didn't want to pay extra for Eddie Bauer trim when they could get a rugged XL or XLT for less. On the flip side, luxury buyers weren't yet ready to embrace a pickup, no matter how nicely it was dressed. The Eddie Bauer F-150, particularly in short bed 4x4 spec, existed in a strange gray area. Too nice for hard labor, but too trucky for suburban comfort. Because of that, very few of these trucks were built, and even fewer were ordered in the now coveted short bed 4x4 combination. Most buyers who did spring for the Eddie Bauer trim opted for the Bronco or the Expedition when it arrived, vehicles that had a clearer identity as upscale haulers. Meanwhile, the Eddie Bauer F-150 quietly disappeared after the 1996 model year, as Ford revamped the F-Series lineup for 1999 with a more aerodynamic body and a shift toward a broader mainstream appeal. Fast forward nearly 30 years, and the 1995 F-150 Eddie Bauer short bed 4x4 has become an accidental classic, a rare bird from an era before luxury trucks were normalized. Most were driven into the ground, traded off, or modified beyond recognition. Survivors in original condition are scarce, and collectors have started to take notice. The two-tone paint, the period-correct badging, the subtle luxury touches, all of it has aged into something retro and desirable. It's especially appealing to Gen Xers and older millennials who remember these trucks from childhood, but couldn't afford one back then. This truck also marks the end of an era. It was one of the last years of the old square-body F-150, which had defined American roads since 1980. These trucks were tough, honest, and square-jawed, a far cry from the swoopy, high-tech Fords that would follow. The Eddie Bauer version represents a brief experiment, an attempt to graft comfort onto tradition, to bring luxury into the work truck or world before the market was ready. And that's exactly what makes the 1995 Ford F-150 Eddie Bauer edition, short bed 4x4, so fascinating. It was ahead of its time, awkwardly elegant, and totally underappreciated. But for a select few, it was the perfect truck, capable, comfortable, and undeniably cool. Now, in an age when luxury pickups dominate, it finally gets the respect it never received when new. Not because it shouted, but because it whispered. The 1979 Ford F-150 freewheeling package stands as one of the most flamboyant and unapologetically bold expressions of 1970s American automotive culture, especially in the pickup truck segment. To understand just how wild and unique this package was, you have to picture the era, a time when muscle cars were fading, disco was king, and personalization was exploding as buyers sought vehicles that reflected their personality and lifestyle. The F-150, traditionally a no-nonsense, work-oriented pickup, suddenly became a canvas for this cultural shift. And the freewheeling package was Ford's audacious answer to that changing market. Visually, the freewheeling package was a riot of color, stripes, and graphics that could have easily doubled as a disco dance floor on wheels. Bright, bold stripes with sweeping sunset-inspired gradients ran along the sides and tailgate, contrasting dramatically with the base paint colors that often range from electric blues to vibrant oranges and deep reds. This was not subtle by any stretch of the imagination. Complementing this visual spectacle was the use of deep, glossy black trim that wrapped around the truck's fenders, grille surrounds, and bumpers, adding an aggressive frame that made the graphics pop even more. The look was completed by shiny chrome wheels, large and polished, that reflected the flashing lights of the era's nightlife and gave the truck a distinctive presence wherever it rolled. But the freewheeling package wasn't just about aesthetics. It represented a cultural crossroads where traditional American pickups met the emerging youth culture's desire for personalization and self-expression. At a time when cars were moving away from raw power and muscle, and fuel crises had consumers worried about efficiency, the freewheeling F-150 was still a powerful beast underneath, often equipped with robust V8 engines like the 351 Windsor or even the 400 and 460 big blocks, depending on the buyer's preferences. This meant that while it looked like a show truck ready for the club scene, it was still perfectly capable of serious towing, hauling, and off-road work. It was a paradoxical vehicle, equal parts performance machine, and rolling fashion statement. The package also included interior touches aimed at enhancing comfort and style, sometimes featuring upgraded seats with special trim and decals inside to match the exterior theme. The goal was to elevate the pickup from a simple workhorse into something you could be proud to drive anywhere, from construction sites to weekend parties. This was an era before luxury trucks became a formal category, but the freewheeling package arguably paved the way by offering something more than raw utility. However, the timing for such a flashy truck was both a blessing and a curse. The late 1970s were a transitional period for the American auto industry, with tightening emissions regulations, fuel economy concerns, and changing consumer tastes. The over-the-top style of the freewheeling package clashed with the growing desire for more practical, efficient vehicles. The early 80s ushered in a more restrained, functional approach to truck design, and flashy graphics and colors gave way to more conservative palettes and simpler trim. The freewheeling, for all its charm and character, was very much a product of a specific cultural moment that rapidly passed. As a result, the freewheeling package lasted only a couple of model years, disappearing quietly as Ford shifted its focus. Many of the trucks that rolled off assembly lines with the package were used hard. After all, they were pickups, not show-only cars. Their bold paint schemes faded or were repainted, decals peeled off or were stripped, and many were converted back to plain trucks for practical reasons. This left few examples intact as time went on, and surviving freewheeling F-150s in original condition are extremely rare today. Collectors who have tracked down surviving models often speak of the freewheeling F-150 with a mix of affection and disbelief. It's like discovering a lost piece of Americana that tells a story about a time when the boundaries between work and play were blurred, and trucks could be just as flashy and personality-driven as any muscle car or sports coupe. These trucks remind us that pickup culture has always been more diverse and vibrant than many give it credit for. In the grand narrative of Ford's legendary F-Series, the freewheeling package represents a vivid chapter that captures the spirit of an era, the late 70s disco decade, where fun and flamboyance temporarily took center stage before practicality reclaimed its throne. It's a reminder that trucks, for a brief shining moment, were more than tools. They were extensions of personal identity, ready to turn heads and command attention, even if only for a fleeting moment in time. The 1979 Ford F-150 freewheeling package remains a cult classic, a rare snapshot of a colorful. The 1987 Ford Bigfoot Cruiser is one of those extraordinary and rare moments in automotive history where two wildly different worlds collided in an unexpected, almost surreal fashion. The realm of monstrous off-road show trucks and the everyday practical pickup. To truly understand the significance of this collaboration, you have to appreciate the cultural context of the mid-1980s. Monster trucks were no longer underground curiosities or backyard experiments. They were becoming mainstream entertainment, with Bob Chandler's Bigfoot trucks emerging as the undisputed kings of this new automotive spectacle. Bigfoot had transcended mere monster truck status, was to become a cultural icon, synonymous with power, destruction, and raw, untamed fun. Their crushing car-smashing shows were selling out arenas, capturing the imagination of a generation hungry for spectacle and extreme machines. Ford, never one to ignore a trend or a marketing opportunity, saw a chance to harness that raw appeal and bring some of that monster truck magic into the showroom. What emerged from this was the 1987 Ford Bigfoot Cruiser, a dealer-sold street-legal pickup that was meant to embody the spirit of the monster truck phenomenon, but still be usable on public roads, a unique middle ground between show truck insanity and everyday utility. Starting with Ford's popular compact truck, the Ranger, and in some cases the larger F-150 platform, the Bigfoot Cruiser was transformed dramatically. The first and most obvious modification was the massive lift kits, which raised the truck's body and chassis well beyond stock ride height, giving it a towering presence that was almost absurd in scale for a street vehicle. These lift kits weren't just for show, they dramatically altered the truck's off-road capability, making it capable of tackling terrains that ordinary pickups could only dream of. Accompanying the suspension lifts were gargantuan tires, oversized, aggressive, knobby beasts that looked like they belonged exclusively in mud bogs or monster truck arenas. The tires and lift combined gave the Bigfoot Cruiser the stance and silhouette of a mini-monster, a visual statement that turned heads wherever it went. But it wasn't just about size. The trucks were painted with wild, eye-catching graphics inspired by Bob Chandler's famous Bigfoot monster trucks. Bold, screaming colors like black, red, and sometimes bright orange were common, often featuring huge Bigfoot lettering and monster truck motifs across the hood, doors, and tailgate. This livery turned the Bigfoot Cruiser into a rolling billboard for the monster truck craze, an unmistakable vehicle that shouted loud and proud about its lineage. Even the interiors received some special touches: unique upholstery, Bigfoot logos embroidered into seats, and limited edition badges on the dash and door panels, marking the truck as part of a very exclusive, quirky Ford family. Mechanically, the Bigfoot Cruiser stayed mostly true to the donor trucks, with Ford's reliable V6 and V8 engines powering the lifted monsters. They weren't tuned to extreme performance, but the combination of power, oversized tires, and lifted suspension created a beastly driving experience that was both thrilling and, in some ways, challenging. The raised center of gravity, the truck's bulk, and the massive tires meant handling was unique. Definitely not for the faint of heart or the tight city streets. But off-road, the Bigfoot Cruiser could stomp over obstacles and traverse difficult terrain with an authority that made it a standout in any off-road convoy. Despite the obvious spectacle and potential, the Bigfoot Cruiser was never intended to be a mass-market hit. Ford produced only a limited number of these trucks, primarily selling them through select dealerships that wanted to cater to enthusiasts looking for something that defied convention. As a result, the Bigfoot Cruiser quickly became a cult vehicle, beloved by fans of monster trucks and collectors alike, but never widespread enough to truly impact the mainstream truck market. Its rarity today adds to its mystique and desirability among collectors who appreciate its bizarre yet compelling place in automotive history. The Bigfoot Cruiser's place in Ford's history is a fascinating one. It represents a moment of bold experimentation and cultural synergy. Ford capitalized on a peak moment in American motorsport entertainment, embracing a trend that most manufacturers would have considered too niche or risky. By doing so, they created a truck that was more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of 1980s excess, of the era's fascination with extremes, and of the cross-pollination between entertainment and automotive design. In many ways, the Bigfoot Cruiser foreshadowed modern truck culture, where lifted, aggressively styled pickups have become commonplace and highly sought after. However, back in 1987, this concept was far from ordinary. It was a bold. The 2002 Ford SVT Lightning Harley-Davidson prototype remains one of the most intriguing, if obscure, experiments in the history of American performance trucks, embodying a bold attempt to blend two powerful icons of American culture and engineering into a singular, high-octane creation. This vehicle was the brainchild of Ford's Special Vehicle Team, SVT, known for their unapologetically aggressive approach to truck performance, and Harley-Davidson, the legendary motorcycle manufacturer that has long represented freedom, rebellion, and an unmistakable attitude on two wheels. The concept was simple in theory, but complex in execution. Take the already formidable SVT Lightning, a truck revered for combining raw power with surprising agility, and inject it with the unmistakable swagger, design cues, and heritage of Harley-Davidson to create a muscle truck unlike anything ever seen before. At its core, the prototype leveraged the SVT Lightning's supercharged 5.4-liter V8, which was already a powerhouse, producing roughly 360 horsepower in the production model. For the Harley-Davidson edition, engineers pushed the supercharger setup even further, tuning the engine for increased output that likely nudged past the 400 horsepower mark. This was no mere cosmetic collaboration. The mechanical upgrades ensured the truck not only looked the part, but could deliver the blistering performance expected from such a rare fusion. The suspension was modified and lowered to provide sharper handling and a more aggressive road presence, which was a key component of SVT's philosophy to marry muscle with precision. The truck's chassis was stiffened and fine-tuned to handle the extra power, making it as capable on twisty roads as it was commanding on the straightaways. From a styling perspective, the Lightning Harley-Davidson prototype was a feast for the eyes, yet with a rebellious edge. It wore unique Harley-Davidson badging and emblems in several places, including the grille, tailgate, and inside the cabin, symbolizing this rare union between motorcycle culture and muscle truck performance. Custom paintwork embraced the iconic Harley-Davidson color palette. Deep blacks contrasted with fiery oranges and subtle metallic accents, giving the truck an aggressive yet refined look that turned heads without screaming for attention. Chrome trim was used sparingly but effectively, adding an upscale shine that contrasted with the dark, muscular bodywork. Wheels were bespoke designs, large and commanding, finished to reflect Harley's blend of ruggedness and style, and wrapped in performance tires to ensure grip matched power. The interior was equally impressive and unique. Drawing inspiration from Harley's motorcycle cockpits, the cabin featured premium leather upholstery with embroidered logos, special stitching patterns, and custom Harley-Davidson-themed accents integrated into the dashboard, steering wheel, and center console. Instrumentation was tailored to reflect a sporty yet luxurious experience, blending SVT's focus on driver engagement with Harley's bold design language. Comfort features were not sacrificed in the pursuit of performance. Instead, the truck's interior struck a balance between muscle truck, toughness, and refined luxury. The overall experience was meant to evoke the spirit of riding a Harley on the open road, but with the added practicality and presence of a high-performance pickup. Despite all the potential and excitement surrounding the project, the Lightning Harley-Davidson prototype never made it to production. Ford executives ultimately deemed it too niche, too wild, and possibly too expensive to appeal to a broad enough audience at the time. The early 2000s were a transitional period for performance trucks, with growing demand but also a conservative market that was not quite ready for such a radical, branded hybrid. Additionally, marketing a vehicle that combined a two-wheeled icon with a four-wheeled performance pickup posed unique branding challenges that likely contributed to its shelving. The prototype was quietly tucked away in Ford's private collection, a hidden gem that remains largely unknown, even among the most dedicated enthusiasts. In retrospect, the 2002 Ford SVT Lightning Harley-Davidson prototype can be seen as a visionary glimpse into the future, anticipating the eventual rise of limited edition co-branded vehicles that have become more common in the decades since. It was a pioneering effort that showcased Ford's willingness to push boundaries and experiment with cross-brand collaborations long before such partnerships became mainstream. The truck encapsulated a moment when American automotive culture was ready to embrace performance, heritage, and lifestyle branding in unprecedented ways.